Welcome to the Contributor Corner for Run Radio. We've got Chef Alessandro de Luca from Italian Kitchen joining us. What do you have for us today?
Oh, today we are looking at the back. We're looking at what happened and how the Italian American cuisine was born.
Okay.
And I was impressed because I did some research for this topic. And I say, okay, that makes, puts things in perspective. And at the same time, as I sometimes have heard, is we're going to slaughter some sacred cows. I mean, there are preconception that everybody has. I mean, me as an Italian, I have preconception about American Italian food, and American Italian have ideas about Italian food. And let's try to clear the air and figure out stuff. So Italian American started coming between 19 and at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. We have to consider these people were mostly from the South, because the one from the North, they moved to South America for some reason. Mostly from the South, people come to North America. And we have to consider these people had no money back home and no food. They were coming from a very impoverished country, and they didn't have the tools back home to have agriculture that was, as strong as the one in the US. So you imagine all these poor people, pretty much illiterate, coming to the US. And the US, they found a place that is fantastic because from within not even weeks from then when they land, wherever they land, they can find a job. And with the job, they have money. And with money, they can finally buy all the food that was missing back home. Because, I mean, in Italy, unless you have chickens, you didn't have eggs. You had to buy eggs, and they were expensive. Just like meat, unless you were a butcher, or rich, it was difficult to find meat. Here, everything was totally different. So they started using the recipe that they brought from home, but they changed them because now they have this cornucopia of ingredients. And so they started adding eggs and meat and butter to everything they could to celebrate this newly founded richness, okay? And so this was the beginning of the change. They were not anymore following recipes from home. They just adapted to the new richness of ingredients. The other problem was there was literally, until 1960, there was no book talking about Italian recipes. And so everything was just like passed orally from mother to daughter, from grandmother to daughters, and go on. Finally, in the 60s, we have this kind of weird situation in which the Italian American are a lot, and we go through that phase in which nobody of the immigrants wanted to be perceived as immigrants. So you have all this section, still now, generations of immigrants, and not just Italian, who don't speak the language of their grandparents and don't know anything about the grandparents' culture, because for 50 years, you needed to be Americans. I mean, the idea of the melting pot went up to an extreme, to the point in which your own culture, where it was not a melting pot of culture, it was just, this is the culture, you drink from the melting pot, your culture doesn't exist anymore. And so parents teach the language and didn't teach the rest. So in the 60s, what happened is, finally, the first books of Italian American cuisine came out, and they were written by Anglo-American chefs who had an idea of what Italian cuisine was, but they adapted to their taste and the ingredients that they have here, because of course the ingredients in the US, they're not the same ingredients over there. And so the next level was, you have now in the 80s or late 70s, in the late 70s and 80s, all these people who are, oh, I'm Italian because my grandma was Italian, because, and now I don't know what to cook. So what they did, they went to the only books that were available, that were written by someone who was never been Italian, never been in Italy, and had just like adjusted recipes or pretty much invented recipes. And that's what they did. They learned that recipes that were created by someone who was never Italian were actually the base for Italian cuisine. And so that's where Giopino came out. That's where the Ciopino come out, the Alfredo come out, all those crazy mix with chicken and pasta that we will never eat. All that stuff came out like that. So instead of learning from immigrants, the generation before mine had to learn on books written by someone who have never an idea what Italian food look like, tastes like, and has to be made.
Oh, that's very interesting. So if someone comes to you and asks for Alfredo, what do you do?
I mean, it's a staple of American cuisine, American Italian cuisine. So I make it as close as possible to the original version.
Very good. All right. Thanks for sharing authentic Italian food at Italian Kitchen. Check out their information and more at runradio.net. Thanks, Alex.
You're welcome. Thank you.